Let's now talk about some improvements that can speed up your workflow. For example, every time you want to test your age, you have to start up Yuru, and that can be a time-consuming process. There are some things that you can do to speed it up. For example, every time you start Yuru, it checks whether you have the correct CD in your CD-ROM drive. And the time it takes for the CD-ROM drive to spin up just to tell you, yes, you have the correct CD, well, you can save this time. I have applied a no CD patch. You can find those on the internet. I own a legitimate copy of Yuru, so I have a pure consciousness about that. Secondly, inside this AVI subfolder, there are two intro files. These are the Ubisoft and Cyan World intro files that are being played every time you start the game, and you have to hit escape to interrupt them. Just a little tip. Rename them from big to backup. That way they won't be played at all. And that saves you 2 clicks in the AVI subfolder here. Another thing that is actually, you need a special keyboard for that, but perhaps you have one of those. I have a keyboard that has additional buttons, for example to launch your email application program or your web browser, but actually I've never used them. But now I thought of them again because you can remap these buttons, and I assigned Yuru to one of these buttons, so now I don't have to click to get to the folder and then double click on Yuru, but I just hit this one key on the keyboard and then the program comes up. When I see this, that reminds me of some settings that you can adjust here. For example, I just push down the texture quality and everything because perhaps, I don't know, it improves loading time. But what is more important, that I run it in a window at a low resolution. That just saves the half a second or second that it takes for the screen to switch to full screen, and later on when you finish testing your age to switch back. So this is perhaps also a small tip. I think that's it about the game itself. Drizzle is here. I'll just start it once and then I'll minimize it and come back every time I need to compile the age. Let's now talk about 3D Studio Max, because of course you will use that very often, and some little things here that can be improved. This is how it looks when you start it up, and the little hammer icon here is where you find under More the component utility where you can set the properties for the different components. Just a little tip. Click on this icon here and reduce the number of buttons that are shown here from 10 to 3, because most of them you don't need anyway. And from the list here on the left, click on the component utility and draw it to the topmost button, hit OK, and now you have it here every time and you can open it. A second little thing regarding the component utility, if you drag the edge a little bit to the center here, if you have a large screen, you get a 2-column view, which is nice later on when the rollouts appear for the different properties, which can be quite large. You don't have to scroll through them all the time, but you have this nice layout. And finally, 2 more tips about speeding up your work in 3D Studio Max. One of the things that you'll need most often is up here in the menu, Plasma, the component manager, because here you add new components to the objects in your scene, and in File, Plasma Export, because this is where you export your age, and you need that quite often. Just to save you from clicking through these menus, go to Customize, Customize User Interface, and here in the group, switch from Main UI to Plasma. Then click on Component Manager and assign the hotkey C to it, and go down to Plasma Export and assign the hotkey X to it. This way, if you now close this, you can see it has added the keyboard shortcut. You'd only have to hit C and the component manager pops up, and just hit X to bring up the export menu. And that's it. Speed improvements. I hope they helped you a little bit.